Long ago, in the land of Moab, a young widow faced a choice that would change the world. She could return to her homeland, to comfort and familiarity, or follow a grieving old woman into uncertainty, with nothing promised except hardship. What seemed like a small decision would carve her name into the bloodline of kings. This is the story of Ruth, a story of loyalty, redemption, and a destiny woven into the lineage of kings. Our story begins in the Book of Ruth, chapter 1, during the time of the judges in Israel, a period of chaos and uncertainty. There was a famine in the land of Judah, so severe that people were leaving their homes just to find food. To survive, a man named Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their two sons, Mahlon and Kilion, packed their belongings and said goodbye to their hometown of Bethlehem. They weren't going on vacation, they were refugees, forced to leave everything familiar behind. Where were they going? To Moab, a foreign country across the Jordan River. Now, this wasn't just any foreign country. The Moabites and Israelites had a complicated history. They were relatives, descendants of Abraham's nephew Lot, but they were also enemies. The Moabites had refused to help Israel when they escaped from Egypt, and God had said that Moabites couldn't enter his assembly for 10 generations. But when you're starving, you go where there's food. So this little Hebrew family settled in Moab. Life seemed to improve for a while. Mahlon and Kilion grew up and married local Moabite women. One married a girl named Orpah, and the other married our heroine, Ruth. For about 10 years, life was good. They had homes, work, and family. Naomi, now in her middle years, enjoyed having daughters-in-law who helped around the house. Ruth and Orpah learned about the God of Israel from their husbands and mother-in-law. Everything seemed settled. But then, tragedy struck like lightning. First, Elimelech died, leaving Naomi a widow in a foreign land. She still had her sons, though. They could take care of her. But then, as Ruth 1:5 told us, both Mahlon and Kilion died too. The text didn't tell us how. Maybe illness, maybe an accident, but suddenly 3 women who had been secure were left with nothing. In that ancient time, widows had little security. Without husbands or sons, they faced hardship and poverty. These 3 widows, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah, were facing poverty and possible starvation. But then Naomi heard some good news from her homeland. According to Ruth 1:6, the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them. The famine in Judah was over. There was bread in Bethlehem again. And Bethlehem, by the way, meant house of bread. So Naomi made a decision. She would go home. But what about Ruth and Orpah? This is where our story truly begins.
What happens next? Let's discover it together. If you're enjoying this story, please tap the like and subscribe buttons so you never miss more biblical stories like this.
The 3 women, dressed in black mourning clothes, walked along the dusty road from Moab toward Judah. They had said goodbye to their homes, packed their few belongings, and started the long journey together. But as they walked, Naomi's heart was breaking. She loved these young women like daughters, but she knew what awaited them in Israel. They would be foreigners, outsiders, with no family to protect them. Here in Moab, at least, they had a chance to remarry and have families of their own. So Naomi stopped walking. According to Ruth 1:8-9, she turned to her daughters-in-law and said something that showed the depth of her love for them. "Go back, each of you, to your mother's family home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye.
Imagine it. This woman was giving up the only family she had left because she wanted what was best for them. All three women began to cry. Orpah and Ruth protested, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi persisted. In one of the most heartbreaking speeches in the Bible, found in Ruth 1:11-13, she said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up?" She was being brutally realistic. In that culture, if a man died without children, his brother was supposed to marry the widow to continue the family line. This was called levirate marriage. But Naomi had no more sons, no prospects for more sons, and even if she did, these young women could not wait decades for children to grow up. Then Naomi said something that revealed her broken heart. "No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." They all cried again. Then Orpah made her choice. She kissed her mother-in-law goodbye and turned back toward Moab. It was not selfish. It was probably the wise choice. She could rebuild her life, find a new husband, have children. But Ruth made a different choice. As Orpah walked away, Naomi turned to Ruth and said, "Look, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." This was Ruth's moment of truth. She stood at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. Behind her lay everything familiar: her family, her culture, her gods, her chance for a normal future. Ahead lay uncertainty, poverty, rejection, life as a foreigner in a strange land with a bitter old woman. Ruth's response, recorded in Ruth 1:16-17, became one of the most quoted passages in the Bible. "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." This was more than a speech. It was a covenant, a sacred vow. Ruth was saying, "I choose you, Naomi. I choose your people. I choose your God. I choose this path even if it leads to my death." Ruth 1:18 tells us that when Naomi saw Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her to go back. Sometimes love recognizes love. Sometimes sacrifice recognizes sacrifice. So the two women continue their journey.
When they finally arrive in Bethlehem, word spreads quickly. Ruth 1:19 says, "The whole town was stirred by their arrival." The women of the town ask, "Can this be Naomi?" After 10 years away, Naomi has changed. Grief and hardship have aged her. But there's something else. Her name means pleasant, but she tells the women in verse 20, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." She continued, "I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." Standing beside her was Ruth, who had given up everything to be there, but Naomi felt empty. Grief can make us blind to the blessings right in front of us. Ruth 1:22 adds, "So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning." That timing was not accidental. The barley harvest was when the poor could glean, legally gather grain left behind by harvesters. It was their safety net and their chance to survive. God's timing was perfect.
Ruth chapter 2 opened with Ruth showing her character once again. She did not sit around feeling sorry for herself. Instead, she said to Naomi in verse 2, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Gleaning was legal. According to Jewish law in Leviticus 19:9-10, farmers were required to leave some grain for the poor, the widows, and the foreigners. But it was also humble, backbreaking work. Ruth was essentially saying, "Let me go work hard so we can eat." So Ruth went out to the fields, and verse 3 says something beautiful. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. As it turned out. But was it really coincidence? In a story about God's providence, there are no accidents. Who is Boaz? Ruth chapter 2 verse 1 tells us he was a man of standing from Elimelech's clan. He was wealthy, respected, and here's the key detail, he was a relative of Naomi's late husband. In Hebrew, he's called a Gibor Hayil, a man of mighty valor, a man of noble character. When Boaz arrived at his fields that morning, he greeted his workers, "The Lord be with you." And they responded, "The Lord bless you." This was not just politeness. It showed that Boaz cultivated a godly atmosphere. Then he noticed someone new. "Whose young woman is that?" he asked his foreman. The foreman's answer in Ruth chapter 2 verses 6-7 saying, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. Notice what the foreman emphasized. She was foreign, polite, and a hard worker. Boaz's response revealed his character. Instead of ignoring Ruth or treating her like any other gleaner, he went directly to her. His words in Ruth chapter 2 verses 8 and 9 were gentle and protective. "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." This was extraordinary kindness. Boaz did not only allow Ruth to glean, he offered her protection, provision, and preferential treatment. Foreign women working in fields were vulnerable, yet Boaz ensured her safety. Ruth responded with humility and gratitude. According to Ruth chapter 2 verse 10, she fell face down and asked, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes, that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz's answer revealed that Ruth's loyalty had preceded her. In verses 11 and 12 he said, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Boaz recognized Ruth's loyalty to Naomi as an act of faith in God. He saw that she had taken refuge under the wings of the God of Israel, a beautiful image of trust and conversion. At lunchtime, Boaz invited Ruth to eat with his workers. Ruth chapter 2 verse 14 says, "He even served her himself, and she ate until she was satisfied with some left over, and when she went back to work, Boaz secretly instructed his workers to pull extra stalks for her and let her glean among the sheaves, normally off-limits to gleaners."
When Ruth returned home that evening with an ephah of barley, about 30 pounds of grain, that's far more than a gleaner would normally gather in a day, Naomi was amazed. "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who noticed you." Ruth told her the landowner's name was Boaz. Naomi's eyes lit up. Ruth chapter 2 verse 20 records Naomi exclaiming, "The Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. That man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers." A guardian redeemer, or goel in Hebrew, was a family member with the right and duty to buy back family property and even marry a relative's widow to continue the family line. Suddenly, what seemed coincidental revealed God's providence. Naomi, who had felt empty and bitter,
began to see God's hand at work. She instructed Ruth to keep working in Boaz's fields through both the barley and wheat harvests, about 7 weeks total. Ruth chapter 3 begins after the harvest season ended. Naomi, now seeing God's work, devised a plan. She said to Ruth in verses 1 through 4, "My daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." Now, this might sound strange or even improper to modern ears, but let me explain what's really happening. Naomi is instructing Ruth to make a marriage proposal according to the customs of that time. The threshing floor was a public place, and uncovering someone's feet and lying down there was a symbolic request for protection and marriage. Ruth obeyed. In verse 5, she said, "I will do whatever you say."
So Ruth bathed, dressed in her best clothes, and went to the threshing floor. She waited quietly until Boaz finished his meal and lay down beside the grain pile, a common practice to guard the harvest from thieves. Ruth 3, 7 through 8 recounts, "When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Boaz asked, 'Who are you?' Ruth answered humbly and boldly in verse 9, 'I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family.' Boaz responded in verses 10 and 11, 'The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character.' But then Boaz revealed a complication. In verse 12, he says, 'Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. There's someone with a prior claim.' The story just got more complicated. But Boaz was an honorable man. He told Ruth to stay until morning for propriety's sake, and he promised to settle the matter the next day. If he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it." Before dawn, Ruth left with 6 measures of barley, another generous gift from Boaz. When she got home, Naomi asked how things went, and Ruth told her everything. Naomi's response in Ruth 3:18 showed her wisdom. "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today."
Ruth chapter 4 opens with Boaz going to the town gate, the ancient equivalent of a courthouse. This was where legal matters were settled, where contracts were made, and where justice was administered. When the other guardian redeemer comes by, Boaz called out to him. The text doesn't give us this man's name, he's just called so-and-so in Hebrew. Boaz gathered 10 elders as witnesses and explained the situation. There's some property that belonged to Naomi's family that needs to be redeemed, bought back to keep it in the family. At first, the other relative was interested. "I will redeem it," he said. But then Boaz revealed the full obligation. In Ruth 4:5, he said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow,
in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. In other words, buying the property came with the responsibility of marrying Ruth and providing for her and Naomi, and any children would be considered descendants of Ruth's first husband, not his own. The relative responded in verse 6, "Then I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." He was willing to buy profitable land, but he was not willing to take on the responsibilities that came with it. So Boaz legally became the guardian redeemer. According to the custom, the other man took off his sandal and gave it to Boaz as a sign of the transfer, kind of like signing a contract. Boaz then made a public declaration in Ruth 4:9 through 10. "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." The people and elders responded with a blessing that's both a prayer and a prophecy. According to Ruth 4:11 through 12, they say, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." They were asking God to make Ruth as fruitful and significant as the great matriarchs of Israel. Little do they know how literally this prayer will be answered. Ruth 4:13 gives us the beautiful conclusion. "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son." After years of barrenness and loss, Ruth became a mother. But the story doesn't end with her happiness. It expands to include Naomi's joy as well. The women of the town come to Naomi with congratulations, as recorded in verses 14 through 15. "Praise be to the Lord who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Think about this. Naomi, who had said, "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter," is now surrounded by joy. The woman who felt empty is now full again. The woman who thought God's hand was against her now sees his blessing all around her. Ruth 4:16 through 17 tells us, "Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, 'Naomi has a son,' and they named him Obed."
But here's where the story becomes bigger than just one family's happiness. The Book of Ruth ends with a genealogy in verses 18 through 22 that connects Ruth's story to the grand narrative of God's plan. This, then, is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. David, King David, the greatest king in Israel's history, the man after God's own heart, came from Ruth's family line. This foreign woman, this Moabite who wasn't even supposed to be part of God's people, became the great-grandmother of Israel's greatest king. But it gets even more amazing. If you turn to Matthew chapter 1 in the New Testament, you'll find another genealogy, the family tree of Jesus Christ. And there, in verse 5, you'll find Ruth's name. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. Ruth, the loyal foreign woman who chose to follow the God of Israel, became an ancestor of Jesus himself, the Savior of the world.
So what does Ruth's story teach us today? What can we learn from this ancient tale of loyalty, love, and providence? First, small acts of loyalty can change the course of history. Ruth had no idea her choice to stay with Naomi would place her in the family line of the Messiah. She simply knew she loved Naomi and could not abandon her. Sometimes the smallest choices become the greatest acts of faith. Second, God's love has no boundaries. Ruth was a foreigner, a Moabite, technically an outsider, yet God welcomed her, made her part of his people, and wove her life into his plan. No matter your past, your background, or where you've come from, God's grace is for you. Third, faithfulness is always rewarded, even when we can't see the outcome. Ruth was faithful to Naomi. Naomi guided Ruth. Boaz acted with integrity. And God wove their choices together into something beautiful. When we choose loyalty and kindness, we open the door for God's blessings. Fourth, your present suffering does not define your future hope. Naomi went from bitterness to blessing. Ruth went from widow to wife, from emptiness to abundance, from obscurity to honor. God can redeem any life, restore what is lost, and turn pain into purpose. Maybe you're at your own crossroads today. Maybe like Ruth, you're deciding between what's easy and what's faithful. Maybe like Naomi, you're feeling empty and wondering if God has forgotten you. Maybe like Boaz, you have the opportunity to extend kindness to someone who needs it most. Ruth's story reminds us that our choices matter, not just for us, but for generations we may never meet. The Book of Ruth shows us God is always at work. He was at work when Ruth took the road from Moab. He was at work when she gleaned in Boaz's field. He was at work when Boaz showed kindness. He was at work when the kinsman declined to redeem her. And he is at work in your story too. Where you go, God will go. Where you stay, God will stay. Your people can become his people. His love can become your love. That's the promise of Ruth's story, and it's alive today. Sometimes love means staying when leaving is easier. Sometimes faithfulness means choosing the harder path. But Ruth's story shows us this: when we choose loyalty, kindness, and faith, even in small, everyday acts, God can weave it into something far greater than we ever imagined. That is the power of a love that never lets go.
Have you ever faced a choice where doing what's right felt harder than doing what's easy? Tell us in the comments. It might give someone the courage to choose faith today. If this touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with loved ones. See you in the next story.